Hello friends, it's me. Things have been hectic lately, but that's no excuse to not keep you updated. So today we'll go over everything that happened over the past few months and how we got here. The voices in the basement got louder, so loud that they could be heard throughout the house. And they weren't just loud, they were angry. They were screaming and cursing and banging on the pipes. And the scariest part is they seemed to know exactly what I was doing. Like if I would walk into a room, they'd start talking about whatever I was doing. Or sometimes I'd be thinking of something and they'd start talking about that. It was like they were reading my mind. In October, things took a turn for the worse. I couldn't afford to lose my house, so I had to figure out a way to make the voices stop. But I needed time to think. I went down there with a flashlight and a baseball bat and told them it's over. Get out of my house. But none of them answered. Well, they all ignored me. I grabbed a sandwich and walked toward the counter. But before I could say anything, the clerk asked, "Hey, you need to put that down?" I looked down and saw that I was holding 2 sandwiches. It must have slipped out of the package without me noticing. I apologized and put the second sandwich back. As soon as we stepped foot inside, I could feel the temperature change. And when we opened it, they were deafening. But to my surprise, there was nothing there. The basement was empty. It was just a concrete room with some boxers and a furnace. And standing in the middle of it was a pentagram. It was freezing cold. And then we heard the voices start whispering. And it was then I knew the basement door had to be opened. There was no other option. I could hear them through the walls and the floorboards. And the pentagram was gone. It was like nothing had ever been there. But I knew it had. I knew because I still heard the whispers. And just like that, the feeling of dread lifted. I could finally breathe easy. I could finally sleep at night. I guess I should have known better than to ask for help. The whispers are gone, and the pentagram hasn't reappeared. But I'm still keeping a close eye on things. I'm not taking any chances. I've learned that it's always better to be safe than sorry. I even felt something brush against my leg, and I jumped back in surprise. When I looked down, there was nothing there. But it's hard to sell a house when potential buyers see the pentagram in the front yard and hear the stories of the previous owner who had to be Yeah, I'm still having trouble letting go of the past. And as I turned to look, the news anchor was looking directly at me. They were coming from the backyard. So we called the priest back and told him what I had learned. And he agreed to perform an exorcism on the yard. And then we saw the pentagram and we both knew we had to destroy it. So we poured the holy water on it and sprinkled salt and then read some verses from the Bible. And then I felt lighter. And he said, "Yeah, actually, when I was watching the house, I saw these figures running across the yard. They were fast, like lightning fast. And then I lost sight of them. I didn't think much of it. I assumed they were some teenagers messing around. Like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders." No, I mean, she was looking directly at the camera. And I swear her eyes were filled with fear, as she said, "Police are now searching for a missing man who has barricaded himself in his basement. They believe he is dangerous and should not be approached. His name is Michael, and he may be armed." And then the screen showed a picture of me, but all I heard was more screaming and laughter. Then they started making fun of me. I explained everything to him and asked if I could stay with him for a while. And he said, of course. He welcomed me with open arms. They said things like, "Oh, look at the crazy man." And when the show was over, the clerk said, "You better get out of here. I don't want people recognizing you." And I explained to him what had been happening and why I thought it was important to come here. I told him about the voices in the basement, and he said, "You know, the scriptures tell us that those who believe in Jesus will cast out demons." I said, "You don't really think that would work, do you?" And he said, "Well, it's worth a shot. What else do you have to lose?" I nodded and ran out the door. I grabbed my things and drove away. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. That night I stayed in a hotel. I didn't dare go home. I mean, I wasn't sure what was down there. I didn't want to find out by opening the door, but I also didn't want to risk whatever was down there finding me. He thinks he can scare us off with a flashlight. "You're too late, crazy man. We're here to stay." Things like that. Of course, I tried talking to them. This went on for weeks, and I barely slept or ate. All I did was pace around my house and listen intently for any moment when the voices would stop, hoping that meant they were leaving. At first it was just one light, but then more and more lights started turning on, and this continued until every single light in the basement was on, and then the voices started chanting, 1, 2, 3, 4, open the door, and then the doorknob started to shake. At first it was just a slight movement, but then it started to get faster and faster, spinning around and around. But then I realized they never stopped. They just kept going over and over again, day and night. Then one night, right after I fell asleep, the lights in the basement started flickering. That's when I knew I had to get out of the house. So I called my brother and asked him to watch over the house, to keep an eye on it until I figured out what I was going to do. I called a few old friends and asked if I could crash at their place for a few days while I sorted things out. Then I remembered there was one person who still talked to me, Pastor Caleb. So I gave him a call. On my way there, I stopped by a convenience store to get some food because I hadn't eaten in days. And that's when I noticed the TV above the counter was showing the news. It was then I realized why my phone had been ringing nonstop with unknown numbers. It was the media trying to get a hold of me. I arrived at the pastor's house and he welcomed me in and offered me food and a place to sleep. So the next morning, we gathered some holy water and salt and made our way to my house. We descended the stairs and went to the basement, and as we approached the door, the whispers became screams. We searched the whole room, but there was no one down here. It was like they had vanished into thin air. But the next day, the whispers started again. So I called my brother and asked if he had seen anything weird, and that's when it hit me. These beings, they weren't coming through the basement. As we stood in the backyard waiting for the ritual to begin, I could feel their presence all around me. It was like the grass was breathing on me. Then the priest started reading from the Bible and making the sign of the cross and blessing the yard. Now, it's been a few months since then, and everything's been great. Oh, and the house is up for sale. I don't want to live here anymore. I want to start fresh somewhere else. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit the like button. Thank you for watching.